All right. Well, thank you and welcome. My name's Jon Marler. I'm a ham radio dude, and I'm a hacker. My first radio was a Lafayette KT200 that my grandfather built in 1950. It's referred to as a boat anchor, and now I know why. If you ever get an old radio like that, they're full of paper capacitors. Be very careful before you plug it in. Replace those because you put paper across 110 volts and it catches fire. Pro tip. I first got my technician license at DEF CON 27, came back and got my general the next year, and got my extra the year after that. Definitely, if you don't have your license, take advantage of it because they don't charge for it. And a lot of places charge $20-$30 for it, and you can do unlimited attempts, and definitely take advantage of that. So you can find me on the ham radio, typically on 40-meter voice. I play with FT8 a lot more than I do voice. Voice is difficult for me, and I also have been known to spam a lot of SSTV here at the con and on HF on 14230. I do a lot of making and breaking electronics. I love taking apart old 8-bit computers and putting them back together again and selling them on eBay. At least I should be. And I may or may not be a robot cat from the future, which is a Doraemon joke. So what are we going to talk about today? Really, one of the things that got me excited about getting into ham radio was I don't really like to talk to people so much on the radio, and I was like, I want to do computer things on the radio. How do I do computer things? So we're going to talk about what the digital modes are that you can do with the computer. We're going to talk about some popular things like APRS. We have an APRS demo station over there. This radio does APRS. And then we're going to talk about what the digital voice modes are, and analog works, so why do I need digital? I'll explain all that. And then I'll talk about some hardware and good ways to get started. So really, what's a digital mode? The thing about digital is it's a different type of modulation. So with analog, we have AM, FM, single sideband modulation, and it's that wiggly line up there. That's an analog signal. So with a digital signal, we do discrete square waves. And there's a lot of different kinds of digital modes that you can do on the radio. And I'm going to go through kind of the more popular ones. Some of them are actually really, really old. RTTY has been around for a long time, and it's 300 baud. So that's kind of I don't want to get into too much radio theory and put everyone to sleep, but this is a quick way to understand that. This is an introduction, not a thesis. So what are some of the common types of digital modes? Really, it breaks down to voice or data. I'm a big fan of the data modes, but there's a lot of different voice modes. And the thing to know about the voice modes is they're very hardware specific. And what I mean by that is there's D-Star, there's DMR, there's WiresX. So this is a Yaesu radio from Japan. It speaks WiresX. It does not speak DMR or D-Star, because of patents. Yay, intellectual property theft. So if you're going to get into digital mode for voice, know who you're going to try to talk to. If you're going to try to talk to your buddies and your buddies are on Yaesu and you go buy a D-Star radio, you can't talk to them over digital. And know what repeaters are in your area. A lot of repeaters are Yaesu repeaters, and they're called fusion repeaters, and they can do WiresX and they can do FM. So just kind of know what you're getting yourself into. There are some software kind of freebies, which is FreeDV and M17. I'll talk more about that later. And then there's some very common data modes. A lot of people don't think SSTV is a data mode. You're wrong. Yes, it was created in the 1950s for the Apollo space program, and you could do it with an analog TV. We don't do it that way anymore. We use computers. It's a digital data mode. Fight me. APRS is probably one of the most common because you can buy a radio that does it. This one does it. You can buy little transmitters to do it. It's extremely common. That's definitely a data mode. It uses X25. And then FT8 is also extremely popular. It makes it really easy to make QSOs on HF without having to know the protocol of this is K4CHN calling CQ on 40 meters, CQ, CQ, CQ calling CQ, this is K4CHN. Yeah, you don't have to do all that. And then figure out, when you make a contact, what do I talk about? I have a radio. Do you have a radio? Oh, yeah, awesome. What kind of radio do you have? Sweet, cool. What kind of antenna do you have? Sweet. Do you have an HOA? No? Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks. It's a lot easier than that. So I like that because I'm socially awkward, and that's okay. So in that vein, this is what so some of the most popular digital modes. I talked about FT8. There's also FT4, JS8 call that all uses the same software. There's this software application called WSJTX, and that's what the two of the screenshots are up there. The screenshots over. This is WSJTX, and then this is JS8 call. JS8 call is more like you can type messages out and send text messages back and forth. You can kind of do that in FT8 if you're really tricky, but most people don't do that with FT8. It's more just like connect, send your signal report digitally, get it back, you can log it, and then you've made a QSO. Now the screenshot on the left, this is called WSPRnet. What's really cool about WSPRnet, that screenshot right there is an image, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so what it does is it's a really long, to send a one WSPR 8 packet takes 60 seconds. And the thing that's really cool about it is the radios can hear it at a really, 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 really quiet level. It's one of the advantages of digital modes, and I'll show you a chart that kind of demonstrates that when I get to voice. I was able to transmit from Austin, Texas to a boat off of Antarctica, and it heard me. Now, it probably didn't hear me very well, but it heard me enough that it could report a signal report and with my call sign back into the WSPRnet. The thing that's cool about WSPR is it lets you know, like, because a lot of times you're on your radio, you're like, can anybody hear me? Like, is my antenna just broke? Is my coax feed cable broke? Like, am I getting out very far? Am I only going in my neighborhood? WSPRnet is a great way. You can switch bands. You can switch to any of the bands that you're licensed to operate on. I love 40 meters, so a lot of times I'm just on 40 meters. But you can switch that and find out in real time, am I actually broadcasting and can anybody hear me? It's extremely useful. It also has a mode where you can send a signal to the moon and bounce it back, and it'll tell you how long it takes to get to the moon and back for your radio signal, which is kind of cool. When someone says the moon's not real, it's like, watch this. I mean, the moon's real, but did we actually go? I don't know. We'll see. So for the longest time, WSJTX wasn't really updated, and someone it's open source, so someone forked it and added a whole bunch of stuff to it. But they're actually updating it again now, so it's got a 3.0 general release out now, which is great. I still use the improved fork. It has better UI. It's better at showing the bands, showing your signal wave ratio and all that good stuff. It supports dark mode. Bonus. Gotta love dark mode. You can do all sorts of things on that. Q65 is kind of new. They updated some of the stuff for rig control. If you're not familiar with rig control, what that means is you can connect your radio to the computer, and not only can you transmit and receive, but you can also control the radio. So, like, you can switch the frequencies. You can run like I have a FT991, so I can run a recalibration of my tuner. I can run a tune. You can do all sorts of crazy stuff. And for the longest time, a lot of the radios, the rig control was just basically talk or not talk. So they've been doing a lot of work to improve that. And it's open source, so like you can always just get in there and fiddle with it. But I used to say, if they don't update the mainstream software, but actually they do update it now. So check out both. I like the improved, but your mileage may vary. Somewhat recently, it was kind of big news when it happened. The FCC removed the old high-frequency baud rate, which is basically 300 baud, which, in the 50s and 60s, like, that was fast, but it's not fast anymore. APRS does 9600, so they changed that. They replaced the symbol rate limit with the 2.8 kilohertz bandwidth limit, so you can do faster things like Pactor 4 on HF. Definitely something to pay attention to. There's this new digital thing called LoRa. It's pretty cool. I'm going to talk about that some more in a bit. Okay, so what is APRS? we go a little bit deeper into APRS. The thing that's cool about APRS is it's AX25 packet radio. It's traditionally done on VHF, but you can technically run it pretty much anywhere. You can run it on HF if you want to. This radio does it on VHF. It's on a specific frequency in the US. There's a different frequency in the EU. So if you're not living in the US, definitely check your band plan before you start broadcasting on it. Chances are, if you buy a radio in the country you're broadcasting on, it's probably going to be configured already. You're okay. My FT991 came pre-programmed with all the US bands in it. I totally didn't Mars mod it. It's fine. So what do you do with APRS? So most people, kind of the basic usage is you can report your position. So you can broadcast an AX25 packet, takes like a couple seconds, and it'll tell everybody, I'm in a Jeep Wrangler and I'm moving east at 65 miles per hour, and here's my GPS coordinates. You're probably thinking, like, why do I want to broadcast that? Well, I mean, there's reasons you might want to broadcast that. It's actually really nice when you have ham radio friends and they can pull you up on APRS. There's a whole bunch of APRS receivers all over the place that will report that into a website. So you can go to aprs.fi. Did I link that up there? No, I didn't. You can go up there and see where your buddy is. It's kind of cool. You can also send text messages. So there's a lot of what they call mobile rigs. This kind of radio, we don't call it a walkie-talkie. I don't know why. People are sensitive about that. They think it's too childish. They call it a handheld transmitter, an HT. So this is an HT, which is different from a mobile radio. Don't ask me why. I don't know. I don't make the rules. But if you get a mobile radio that plugs into your car that has APRS, they typically have more power, and you can program it to say, like, you have like a fancy little icon on it. But if you know your buddy and you know their call sign, you can send them a text message. And there's even a way you can do it from the internet. So if you go to that aprs.wiki, you can send a call sign a message from the internet, and it'll come out in the radio wherever they are. And it has a whole routing protocol, and it's pretty cool. There's also weather stations that broadcast in APRS, so you get a packet and it'll say, it's 115 degrees outside, the humidity's 10%. Good luck. And then you're in Vegas. I actually live here. I'm local, and the one thing I love about it is I can put super wet dishes out in 5 minutes. They're dry. It's amazing. So that's what I have a buddy who has APRS in his truck, and I can just basically pull up and I can see wherever he is. And I can send him a message, say, hey, call me, dude. It's kind of nice. There's a bunch of different hardware out for it. This is a couple examples. There's a little tiny radio that they call it the Pico APRS. It's kind of cool. It has built-in GPS, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, all that fun stuff. The Kenwood is a really expensive radio that does APRS. This is a FT5D from Yaesu. It does APRS. It's also pricey. A lot of the pricier radios will have the HTs, will have APRS in them. For it to be good for doing location reporting, you need to have a GPRS chip in it or a GNSS, depending on where you're at in the world or which government you follow. So that's important. One of the things that's kind of cool, and someone asked me about this earlier, is you can actually do APRS over LoRa now. And the advantage of doing it over LoRa is unlicensed. So the standard APRS frequency does require a ham license, but if you want to do LoRa without a license, or you want to do APRS without a license, you can use LoRa. Obviously, also LoRa can do licensed transmission, but not encrypted. And why would you want to do APRS over licensed LoRa? Just do APRS. So those are the two frequencies up there. They're a little bit different than the standard mesh-tastic frequencies that they use for LoRa. So be aware of that. You have to have a special radio for it. Depending on where you are in the world when you're transmitting determines whether you use one frequency or the other. So that's a link to the GitHub page for the LoRa APRS project. And those are screenshots of what it looks like to run it on a I think that's a T-beam. Yeah, it looks like a T-beam. So kind of the difference between what why would I want to do LoRa or why would I do APRS over LoRa versus doing it over VHF? It's just a little bit different. So LoRa kind of has its own built-in mesh. APRS is kind of a mesh, it's meshy. But LoRa is more built around the concept of a mesh, and it has built-in features for getting to and from the internet. Obviously VHF APRS can do that as well, but LoRa is kind of designed for that. And really, what I tend to tell people is, if you want to do APRS but you don't have a ham radio license, say you want to just put a bunch of APRSs like in everybody's car, we're going on a road trip across the country, LoRa is a good way to do that. Okay, so let's talk about voice. How does that work at a high level? So without getting into a whole crap ton of like radio theory that nobody cares about, the way that digital voice works is we have to figure out how to encode ones and zeros into a radio signal. There's a bunch of different ways to do that. The most popular are TDMA and FDMA. And really the difference is you're telling the receiver and the sender, obviously, how am I dividing up the frequency into ones and zeros? Am I doing it by frequency or am I doing it by time? And that's what the T and the F stand for in TDMA and FDMA. There's a lot that goes into it. I'm not going to get into it because I don't have enough time and I'll fall asleep. So just understand it's basically you're trying to figure out how to get ones and zeros to come out of an analog signal. Why would you want to do this? This sounds really complicated. The thing that's cool about digital voice is you can get a better signal, you can get a better voice connection with a weaker signal. And that's what that's what this is trying to show here. So what it's saying is, how good is your audio quality versus how weak is your signal? With digital, it basically falls off a cliff. But if with a really weak signal, you still sound really clear. So like if you've ever used a radio on 40 meters or just talking voice, a lot of times you can hear somebody talking, but it's kind of, and you just don't, you can tell somebody's talking, which is one of the advantages of CW. CW, if you can just barely hear the beeps, then you can understand it a lot better. But with voice, that's really hard. The thing that's nice about digital voice is, even with like this is a really kind of like bad signal, right? You still sound pretty close to crystal clear. You'll get a few breaks here or there, and it kind of sounds like you're using Real Player to watch broadcast.com in 2006. But for the most part, it works pretty good. And that's the advantage of digital voice. That's why people like using it. My local repeater does the Yaesu version of digital, and it does Wires X. And the digital sounds so good. It just sounds like they're in the next room, and like you're in a Wires X room, you're talking to somebody who's literally halfway across the world, and it sounds perfectly crystal clear. So it's actually really nice. Now, if you don't want to pay for a really expensive digital mode radio and say, oh, I don't want to pay for all the patents and all that other stuff, I want to do it free. There is a free version. There are free tools for digital voice. FreeDV is one of the more popular ones. It uses its own patent-free, I don't know if it's patent-free, but maybe it's patent permissible, called Codec 2. Really what gates all of the digital voices from talking to each other is the codec that it's using. So like this one has a super secret chip in it with the Yaesu's special codec burned into it, that's protected by patents and governments with guns. So FreeDV uses machine learning-based video voice encoding. You can read about it a lot. It works really well over single sideband. If you don't know what single sideband is, basically you take the bandwidth that you can normally talk to and you cut it in half, and you talk either on the upper or lower band of that. So you get less bandwidth, but depending on where you're talking, you're either doing that or not. And I won't go into that too deep, but basically it works over single sideband, which is great. So like you can do it on 40 meters, you can do it on 20 meters. It's going to work great. And it'll sound pretty close to what it sounds like on your HT with your local repeater. And again, you don't need a special software license. There are apps where you can use you can pay for a license to do some of the other ones, but I don't know why you'd want to do that. So, what are some of the advantages? This talks about comparing single sideband analog voice versus using the free DV. It's basically the same thing that we've been talking about. The one thing to take away from this, the one advantage is you sound better over a weaker signal. To me, that's like the one thing. I mean, I made this neat little graph and everything, but really the biggest advantage is you sound better with a weaker signal. So M17, this one's really popular. It's getting a lot of work done. It has been officially released. It was kind of like in beta for a long time. This one also uses codec 2, but it also has a few different advantages versus the proprietary codec 2. And it uses 9 kilohertz. It can do FM, but most people I know use it in HF. And there are some radios that actually have this built in now. Because it's royalty free, it's kind of like, I'm surprised more radios don't include it. You're going to find it more like in the, if you ever go to AliExpress and search for ham radios, you'll see a lot of radios. So one of my favorite, the Quansheng radio, because it's so easy to hack and the firmware's been owned for a couple of years now. So that's one of my favorite radios. I did a talk on hacking that one a couple of years ago. It was a lot of fun. So you're actually starting to see that, which is great. Okay, so if you want to get started using digital modes, easy mode, spend some money, buy a radio that has it built in. One thing, when I got into the hobby again, I really wanted to do digital stuff, and so I spent a lot of time researching the radios, and I wanted a radio that had a built-in sound card. You're probably thinking like, dude, why do I want a sound card in my radio? The reason you want a sound card in your radio, I have one USB connection into my FT991. It gives me a microphone, a speaker, and 2 serial ports. And what that means is without any extra hardware, just that USB cable, I can connect it to Direwolf, I can connect it to WSJTX, I get full rig control. I can do anything I want on that, and it makes it so much easier. Now, if you don't want to spend the money on a radio like that, there are little adapters you can get. DigiRig's a really popular one where you basically have a USB sound card in there, and then you have your own. It'll connect to the radio using whatever its proprietary weird little cable is. It can do the push to talk over serial. It may have its own serial port. It may connect to the serial port on the radio. Sometimes radios have a serial port, but they don't have a sound card. So you can do that too. So if you have an older radio or a radio that just doesn't have that those kind of advanced features, you could do that. There are QRP digital rigs. QRP is like low wattage. A lot of people use it for POTA, SOTA. What's the other one they call it now? Anyways, there's a bunch of digital only rigs for that. We used to have one on a demo here. It was a cool little one. It ran FT8 on it and everything. Those are great, but yeah, those can get pricey too. Those QRP rigs are pricey. So some of the ones that I like, if you want to do HF digital, the True SDX, there's a bunch of these tiny little multi-band HF rigs that are about $150. The QMX from QRP Labs, that one also has its own built-in USB audio, which is great. Again, I love the FT991, but basically there's the IC7300. I think there's a 7600 now too, and then there's a bunch of them that have that all built in with EasyCat control. Absolutely love that. For handhelds, for like VHF, UHF, a lot of the radios you can get what they call an APRS cable that just plugs into the 2 little prongs on the side, which is one is your push to talk and one is your microphone and speaker. You can get those and pretty much do APRS or do any of the digital modes that you can do on VHF, UHF with a small handheld. We have a couple over there in the demo station if you want to see what that looks like. There's also there's this concept called the TNCs. I'll get more into that in a second. You can get those, and then there's also the LoRa stuff, which LoRa is also what Meshtastic uses, but this is not Meshtastic. That's another talk. So the way I have my rig set up at home, I actually have a Raspberry Pi that's just dedicated to running my radio. And so I have all the software on that. I have my SSTV software on there. I have WSJTX. One of the advantages of using like a little low-powered single board computer is they're easier to take on the road. So if you want to take it out to the park and do POTA, or like me, if your wife doesn't like having a giant ham radio antenna in the house, got to go somewhere else to do that. Makes it really easy to do that. They even have FT8 for Android now, which is kind of rad. Some of the new radios, like the TID radio, has full Bluetooth built into it. So you get speaker, microphone, you get serial control, everything all over Bluetooth, which is kind of rad. And you can connect an Android to it. There's one radio that's like super duper expensive that has all that built in and an Android and everything. There's also the DigiRig. So this little thing right here, this is called the DigiRig. This thing's kind of nice because it's a little expensive, but it's kind of nice because you can basically get a cable specific to your radio. And then if you have multiple radios, you get multiple cables, and you just use one connector. And once you get the DigiRig set up in your whatever software you're using, it makes it really easy to connect it to multiple radios. So that one's kind of nice, and I like that. Okay, so I've convinced you. You're like, all right, dude, I'm in. What do I want to? How do I get started? VAR AC is a new piece of software that's out. VAR AC is kind of like FT8, but it's like a chat room, so like you can really send messages. Think about like similar to JS8 call, but a lot easier to use. A lot of the like Aries groups and other things, they love JS8 call because of reasons, but VAR AC is a lot easier to use. It's a lot of fun to play with. Then there's the WSJTX. This is the one that I spend most of the time in. It does Whisper. I do Whisper and FT8. Whisper's great, like as a first thing to do when you're starting a session. Get out Whisper, send a broadcast, see if you're getting out, see who can hear you, and then okay, I'm good to go. I'm going to start calling CQ on FT8 or just responding to CQs. And then there's JS8 call. Again, this is kind of like the predecessor to VAR AC. This mostly used like with Aries and those type of groups. You have pretty much. I don't play with that one much, but some people like it. Then there's APRS. We talked about that, and the final is FreeDV. This is kind of like they have this cool visualization of FreeDV when you're transmitting. It shows you what the waterfall looks like, and everybody likes pretty graphs and stuff like that. So to kind of summarize that up, what's the name of the software and everything? I think I've pretty much touched on all of those. APRS.fi and APRS.to. If you want to see a map of where everybody is, like who's currently broadcasting on APRS, there's a lot of stations that report that. We have a demo station back there that's showing that map right now. That's a good place to see that. Pretty much I talked about this. So if you need a really, really cheap radio, there's the Pofeng radios. They're not as popular anymore because there's a lot of other brands now. I also like the Quancheng because it's super cheap and it's very hackable. You can buy them for like $20 on AliExpress, buy like 3 of them. So if you blow one up, it's fine. You don't have to cry about it too much. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. I just want to shameless plug. I'm doing another talk at noon about how to get started in ham radio, and then I'm doing a talk at 3 p.m. about Meshtastic. Buddy of mine and I did a research project to figure out how can we break the Meshtastic protocol, how can we hack it, can we shut down the network, can we forge packets, can we do all sorts of things, can we flood the node database. Yes, we can do all those things. We did all those things. We're going to do a live demo of some of it because it's a felony to do some of the other stuff we did. So we're not going to demo that. We tried to do a like little Faraday cage, but it didn't work. So that's coming up at 3 p.m. If you want to get in touch with me, this is how to get in touch with me. I will have all my this deck will go into the DEF CON media server, and it'll be out on my GitHub. And all my decks that I've ever presented are in my GitHub. And I put a super permissible license on them. So if you want to download them and show them in your ham club, or you want to say that you did them, and I don't care. I really don't care. I don't have any kind of I think it's an unlicensed is what I use. But so, anyways, check those out, and if you want to get a hold of me, that's my email address. So thanks for coming. I appreciate it.